Welcome. This is video 18 of the Assessing Risk of Significant Harm training course for child protection practitioners. This course looks specifically at the use of the Stage 2 risk assessment, or Risk 2 format to assess risk of significant harm. Video 18 is the last video in this course. Summary. The threshold of significant harm is the most important decision within child protection practice. The decision triggers the statutory duty on local authorities to investigate child abuse. It is important to get this decision right. The aim of the risk model is to support frontline child protection practitioners to make high-quality and consistent decisions about the threshold of significant harm. This means that decisions can be justified and have a clear rationale about how they were reached. They would be consistent, so two practitioners faced with the same evidence base would reach the same conclusions. Getting this decision right is fundamental to the protection of people's rights. Either the right of families to a private life, or the right of a child to be protected from abuse. It is a decision which is made on the balance of probability. The risk model is a whole system. During the course, you have been introduced to Stage 1 risk assessment, which is a risk screening. This asks a simple question: whether there is an indication of significant harm for this child at this time. It screens all cases, ensuring that it is not only the difficult cases that are discussed in supervision. The difficult cases are usually those that are already well managed and have the oversight of courts or other processes. The risk model reminds us that the unmanaged risks are often in those cases where there is less oversight, often lower priority cases in the preventative and care and support part of the continuum of need. Risk screening ensures practitioners don't become immune to the low-level signals about abuse or neglect that can develop over time. This means that practitioners can sometimes get used to the circumstances of a case. They get used to the information they receive from day to day. You can think of it as an immunity to these signals. So the process of risk screening requires practitioners to check each case and ask whether the threshold is met or not. The child protection system is largely dependent on external triggers. It is often a referral to children's services that starts the child protection process. It often depends on other people triggering a referral or on open cases making children's services consider new information on that open case. Risk screening does this automatically and removes this dependency on external referrals to identify risk of significant harm. And having asked the question about whether there was an indication of significant harm, if there was, the risk model enables further and more detailed risk assessments to be triggered. Risk 2 is a more detailed risk assessment. It builds the risk assessment progressively. It identifies harm by focusing on the relationship between a parent's capacity to meet needs with the unmet needs of the child. It identifies a level of harm and categorises this according to the standard definition in the Children Act 1989. It looks at the likelihood of harm continuing in the future. It then focuses on what makes the harm significant now or likely to be so in the future. Having built each of these components, you were able to write a reason for decision summary. This summary can be used in other reports, including a social work report to case conference. The core of the risk model is the screening of Risk 1 screening and the detailed assessment of Risk 2. For both Risk 1 and 2, there is guidance available to explain how to use it. If you are undertaking a risk assessment before a child is born, there is a specific pre-birth version of Risk 2. It also includes a supplement that can be used to enhance the assessment. The pre-birth risk assessment is slightly different to Risk 2, as pre-birth is primarily a predictive assessment as the child is not yet born. The Significant Harm Checklist was developed specifically to help practitioners with Section 7 of Risk 2. It is in Section 7 that the question whether harm is significant is considered. The Significant Harm Checklist provides some structure to that section. Some practitioners may want to use the checklist every time. Others only use it if it is a more challenging assessment. The checklist has two sections, one focused on the question of seriousness or severity of harm. The other section looks at additional meaning to the harm. The risk model also has a suite of specialist assessment tools. These can be helpful if there is a need for a specific focus in your assessment or risk assessment. For example, if you are assessing parental capacity to change, tools such as the 7 steps of contemplation or the continuum of motivation may support your assessment. The 7 steps of contemplation is a check whether the person is still at the pre-contemplation stage. The continuum of motivation checks whether the person is showing internal or external motivation to change. Other tools include those used to assess neglect. The Home Conditions tool objectively assesses the physical condition of the home and its effect on the child. Another tool to assess neglect is the Graded Care Profile. The Graded Care Profile is a more extensive assessment of neglect and includes areas such as parental responsiveness to the child and how esteem or love is demonstrated. Exercises. Throughout the course, you have been asked to complete exercises. The aim of these is to apply the new learning immediately on a case that is familiar to you. This should assist you to turn the learning into something that means something to you practically. And it is only by trying, succeeding, and sometimes having setbacks that you will embed these ideas into practice. You go up a little and then slide down. You become encouraged and then have doubts. It is all a feature of learning, but of course you won't start learning until you start doing. So these ideas presented have been accompanied with an exercise to embed the learning. Rather than preparing in your mind how you may do this in the future, you are thrown in and encouraged to try it out immediately. And even if something isn't immediately applicable to your own case example, you are prompted to imagine other options about how you could do things. We can look at some of the key matters that you should try to remember from the course. These are harm, significance, Risk 1 screening, Risk 2 assessment, pre-birth, and specialist assessment tools. What is harm? Harm is impairment or ill treatment caused to the child because their needs are not being met or likely to become unmet in the future. Ill treatment is abuse. Impairment covers physical, emotional, intellectual, social and behavioural development, and physical and mental health. Impairment also includes the witnessing of the abuse of others. In Risk 2, harm is assessed by looking at two of its features. These are the capacity of the parents to meet the child's needs and protect them from harm, and secondly, to what degree the child's needs are currently being met. In Risk 2, these are brought together into a colour-coded matrix where the degree of suspected harm is identified. Green signifies that there is little indication of harm, meaning not much harm. Amber is an indication of harm, meaning that harm is suspected. Red is a strong indication of harm, meaning that the evidence that there is harm is very clear. What makes harm significant? Significance in law is established by comparing what is reasonable to expect of a similar child. Case law makes this more practical. It identifies two particular features of significance. These are harm that is serious or severe, and secondly, that harm has additional meaning. Significance of harm is analysed in Section 7 of Risk 2. It can be supported by the use of the Significant Harm Checklist that structures your analysis of seriousness and additional meaning. The checklist has indicators of seriousness derived from working together and indicators of additional meaning structured across three areas. These are what a reasonable parent would have done, whether the child is beyond parental control, and whether they are influenced by external factors such as grooming. The risk model includes two key tools and two key processes. These are Risk 1 and the screening process, and Risk 2 and the risk assessment process. The first is risk screening. A routine screening for indications that there may be concerns about significant harm to a child. This is asking a simple question. Do I have concerns about significant harm to this child? This can be done in supervision as a quick method to screen all allocated cases and decide what needs to be discussed with the team manager. The second is Stage 2 risk assessment, or Risk 2. Risk 2 is a more comprehensive assessment of the likelihood of significant harm. It is more detailed and will require more time to undertake and require further information to explore all the relevant factors. Risk 2 should result in a decision whether there is, on the balance of probability, a likelihood of significant harm for the child. For an unborn child, where there are concerns that the child may suffer significant harm when born, a pre-birth risk assessment can be undertaken. This is a specialist version of Risk 2, adapted for pre-birth risk assessment. Pre-birth risk assessments are largely predictive about likely harm to a child in the future. As a predictive assessment, they lack the evidence of current harm. This differentiates the assessment from the usual Risk 2. There is also a pre-birth supplement that can be used to enhance and further assist your risk assessment. The risk model developed a suite of specialist assessment tools that could be used to assist practitioners when undertaking an assessment or a risk assessment. For example, if in a risk assessment you needed greater clarity about the ability of a parent to change, the change tools provide structure to this question, including a focus on whether the parents are still at pre-contemplation or if their motivation is external. Another example would be an area such as neglect. Tools such as the Home Conditions tool or Graded Care Profile provide a detailed focus on this area. There are a number of these tools that are available. Other agencies have specialist tools that they also use in specific circumstances. This course has introduced the risk model, provided an introduction to the key legal concepts, and looked at risk screening and risk assessment. In particular, it has worked through the Risk2 assessment tool in detail. As you reflect in your workbook, how much of this do you recall? Take notice of what you are finding easiest to recall. How confident do you feel about using the Risk2 format in practice? Are there sections of the course you think you'll need to listen to again? There is also a final section in your workbook for any overall reflections on the course, and you can record your observations in your workbook. You can pause the video in order to fill in your workbook. This course is structured in a way that allows you to take a part of the course and listen to it again. For example, if you wanted a reminder about completing the reason for decision, you can listen to video 16 again. Or if you wanted to think about the legal concept of likelihood, you could select video 7. As you complete the course, review your workbook. If you have completed all the exercises, you will have progressively built your experience and understanding of the Risk2 process. This course has also encouraged you to actively reflect as your learning has progressed. You can complete this by discussing some of your learning and reflections with your supervisor or with colleagues. Please look at the Practice Resource Portal for updates, other information, and other courses that are available. Further information about effective child protection is available on the project's website. The address is noted on screen. Further information about the risk model is also available on a dedicated website. Thank you.